evening.
Good evening.
Today's topic is going to be all about anxiety. I'm here with Michael Leadon, who is the founder of the ministry Unchained Disciples, which is stationed out of San Jose, California. And I had the pleasure of meeting Michael in California, and I attended his Bible studies that he had and some of his fellowship events. And his Bible studies are amazing. Michael, you are a great teacher,
Oh,
and
thank
you
you.
are a wealth of knowledge. You really are. Just
Thank
even
you.
I'm gonna share, guys, his social media information. It's so much there. Like if you like what he says today, please check out his social media. There's so much there for free. So just like flood his social media. You're gonna want to. So like I said today, so Michael, thank you for being willing to come and speak and share this information on anxiety.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Glad to be here. Glad to be here. Yes. Blessing to be heard. It's a blessing to be heard.
Yes, I'm thankful for bringing you on this side of the, bringing you closer to the East Coast. So I'll get some of this
I
information
know. Haven't been
here.
able to travel in a while, so
Yeah,
this
there
is
you
good.
go.
I don't even have to wear a mask. That's great.
Yeah, the beauty of social media. So, Michael, the first thing I just want to get you to tell us is how did you even begin studying the topic of anxiety? How did that come about?
How I started studying anxiety, I'll give you the long
Mhm.
explanation. Start with the
Okay.
semi testimony. I grew up in the church, and at one point I started after growing up, moving out, I realized there's different denominations. So I'm like, well, some of them have to be wrong, and it's like, well, maybe all of them but one are wrong. So I started studying denominations for like not denominations, but just different doctrines, and just to see, okay, well, what do the Baptists believe different than the Methodists? What do the Methodists believe different than the Lutherans? And just trying to figure out who's right. So I did that for like 7 years, and then I started attending a Bible study after I got uninspired from there. I started attending a Bible study for maybe 7 or 10 years. And then at some point, I felt God asking me to teach. So I started teaching a Bible study, and that's how Unchained Disciples started. This is the seventh year
Wow.
for that. And I started teaching and looking at different topics. We teaching to Jesus. We did one that was looking at the kingdom of God, studied that for a year, hearing from God, did different topics. And it was, and then we also did one, angels in the spirit realm. And that was about a year long study. And so just kind of looking at different truths. It was mainly on a search to find the truth, search to find the biblical truth about things.
Mhm.
And I wasn't as focused on application. It was just, what does scripture say? What was the historical context? If you can apply it to your life, if,
Mhm.
this is the difference between the cherubim and the seraphim.
Right.
Somebody's like, so how can I apply that to my life? It's like, well,
Yeah.
if you ever run into one, you'll know now.
Right.
But then a couple years ago, I felt God leading me to start a different group, Unchained Bible Fellowship, and that was a singles group. And I would teach, just kind of regular teaching, various different topics. And then at one point asked, what did they want to learn about? And people started putting in relationships, finances, relationships. And I was like, oh, I didn't really want to teach on relationships, but
Right.
so I started teaching on that for about a year. And then I started realizing that, there were things, I was learning about myself, learning about my past, relationships, and start seeing that, because my thinking was, oh, I'm okay, but, it's these women that are all messed up and this, but then start realizing, okay, seeing patterns and cycles. And
Yeah.
if you see a pattern, if all you think all men are this, or all women are that, it's something wrong with you. It may, yeah, it may be that all men are whatever, even abusive, but it's like it's something that's attracting you to that type of person,
Mhm.
something that attracting you to them and attracting them to you. So realizing, so looking at that, and then I got into the just kind of realizing the concept of wholeness. just so it's
Mm.
constantly being healed. So a lot of the issues that we have are because we aren't healed from wounds of the past. So being healed and being whole uh, is the series I'm doing now. So we're doing a series on seeking wholeness, and we're about a year into it. We've been looking at, healing from past wounds, been looking at triggers, been looking at, various childhood causes of things. And so right now we're studying anxiety. We're studying anxiety right now. And so with that, at wholeness, that got into psychology.
Mm.
So started looking at psychology in there and looking at different disorders and different things. So studying psychology, and then just studying that, then that kind of led to also to neuroscience. And the lesson we're on right now in the series on wholeness is anxiety. And so that's kind of what led me to where I'm now. So we're on the fourth lesson on anxiety, fourth. Um, and so that's how the long route to how I
Yeah.
got into studying anxiety. So I'm not a medical professional. So
Mm.
it's yeah. So that's how we got to anxiety.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. So I didn't realize this, but so when you start studying something, you really dive in. You're spending years, like years, studying specific topics. Wow.
Yeah, that wasn't the
Wow.
initial intent. So
Yeah.
it just kind of happened. So anxiety, I guess, I mean not anxiety, but wholeness, I think I
Mhm.
kind of knew it would be. But some of them, like the angels in the spirit realm, it just started with one thought. Someone said, "Oh, my cousin told me I should pray to angels. Should I pray to angels?"
Oh, mercy.
Then we were looking at testimonies,
Yeah.
and I saw a quote from a priest saying that the angels are jealous of Christians because we have a testimony.
Mm.
Because God can ask us why we love Him, and we
Mhm.
have an answer. But they don't have an answer to that. They were
Mhm.
created to do that, and so we have a something that endears us to God that they don't have. And so hearing that about angels, so then it was like, so that kind of got into the study of angels, but then it just
Mhm.
led into one thing or another, and then wholeness. Once we get in, so the plan wasn't to go a year. Like
Mhm.
wholeness, I thought maybe I had 3 or 4 lessons, and
Right.
just keep getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
Right, so.
That's awesome, and that speaks to the teacher in you too. So just that desire for knowledge that you even have a passion and a zeal to even go after those things and to share it with others. So grateful for that. Let's just get into it. So, Michael, if you could break it down for us, what is anxiety? What is anxiety exactly?
What is anxiety? So anxiety is apprehension, uneasiness, or nervousness about the future. So it's
Mm.
uneasiness about the future. So I've heard it said that depression happens when you're looking at the past, and anxiety happens when you're looking at the future, but only if you're trying to control that future.
Mm.
So anxiety is uneasiness about the future. So it's apprehension about something, either something bad that's going to happen in the future, or the future. It's an emotion. So it's an emotion, and it's a response to stress or a stressful situation, and it's a natural emotion that everyone has. So everyone has anxiety. Everyone has anxiety. Everyone experiences anxiety. When we get anxious, it triggers a different part of our brain. We go into basically fight or flight. So it triggers what they call the amygdala in our brain, and we go into fight or flight mode, which is kind of like flipping you into it, like flipping a robot into a different mode. Our bodies are flipping into a different mode, and it's preparing us to react to some type of threat. So if it was like a dog attacking us, or it would be great, because that's what we need to be in to react fast. But if you're just going through your daily life, you don't want to be in that. So it releases chemicals like cortisol that prepare you for fight or flight, and so it's putting your body in the mode that you shouldn't be in forever. And so it can be harmful. It's harmful to your body if you're always anxious.
Mm.
And so I heard an example of where if you step out into the street and a car is about to hit you, you may look and you see the car and you jump back on the curve, but you actually react faster than your brain actually processes what's going on. So your body actually acts without your brain. That's why that we have what we call hand-to-eye coordination. You know, a baseball player, when the speed that the baseball is coming, they can't actually process it and say, "Hey, I need to move my arms." You can't actually process that fast. That's why it's called hand-to-eye coordination. You know, your eyes interact with your nervous system and it triggers your response. And so it's your brain isn't processing it. So it anxiety puts you in a state to help that, but it's not, you'll jump out of the street and now your heart may be beating and your body's in the state, and so now you can look, are there other threats? Are there other threats? You're able to react to other threats. And so what we should do is, okay, I learned from this situation and process what I need to know and then get out of that state. So it's like we need to learn what we need to learn, do what we need to do, and then get out of that state. But the problem happens is when we're always anxious. We're always in that anxious state.
Oh, man. Okay. Thank you for breaking that down. That's interesting. So this is kind of, have you, in your study, have you learned of any of the harmful effects that like being in that constant state like does to your body specifically?
The harmful states. So 75% of mental and physical diseases are actually attributed to toxic stress. I heard one neuroscientist saying that she was saying 90% of diseases are somehow attributed to toxic stress. So anxiety isn't. So anxiety is diagnosed as a disease. It's diagnosed as a disease, but a lot of recent studies are saying that it's not per se a disease. It's kind of like if I say I have the coughs. I went to the doctor. He diagnosed me with the coughs. It's like I had a fever, and he said I had the coughs. And it's like, yeah, every time I get sick, I cough. When stuff goes down my throat, I cough. Sometimes when I smell a bad smell, I cough. So he diagnosed me with the coughs. It's like, yeah, that's true. You had the coughs, but that's a symptom that's flagging something else. That's flagging some other issue. It's great to you can label it, but it's flagging some other issue. And so when you get it, so it causes problems like your decision making is hampered because you're not using the logical part of your brain anymore. So you're no longer using the logical part of your brain. And so when you're anxious, studies have shown that you're more likely to make black or white decisions. And you're even more likely to do high risk, high reward. You're more likely to choose high risk, high reward decisions than you would have been if you were in your normal state. It also causes problems like with digestion, stomach cramps, ulcers. Now a lot, most of the ulcers are they found it is from a bacteria, but it still can be stress related ulcers. You have the physiological issues. People with more severe anxiety have vomiting, shaking. You can't sleep. It causes things of that nature. It causes appetite. So some people lose weight from it, but then there's also it changes your appetite. Changes your appetite. So when you have anxiety, you crave more for high fat, high sugar foods when you have anxiety. And so a lot of the things that we see as other things are actually results of anxiety.
Wow, that's neat. So I love how you describe the fight or flight response, but to think, and I think we've all, like you said, anxiety is something we all experience, although some people, have it to where, like you said, it's dysfunctional, it's affecting your life, it's unhealthy. But to think about the fact that you're literally, like you said, you're just in fight or flight mode constantly. That I can only imagine. That's devastating to your body. Like just the thought of that, I'm thankful for that visual and that understanding, because we really
Yeah,
have to get rid of that. We're not supposed to live like that.
yeah,
That is
and
like tense. Like that's that tension, that tension.
yeah, and it's harmful. And they say 1 out of 14 people have an anxiety disorder, what they call an anxiety disorder.
Mhm.
It's $42 billion a year spent on it.
Oh mercy.
And they classify a lot of things as anxiety disorder. There's OCD, there's post-traumatic stress, there's generalized anxiety where you're just anxious for no reason. There's panic attacks, panic disorder, and social anxiety where people are just scared to go out. So it's a lot
Yeah.
of different causes of, yeah. And it's
Oh wow. Okay. So I hear you naming all those things I've heard, but I never really linked them specifically to anxiety. I knew like anxiety in my mind is like a root of fear. Like
yeah.
all these things like the panic attacks. But what I didn't realize when you said PTSD, which I guess it makes sense, it has the word stress in there, but I did not link that to anxiety for some reason.
Yeah, I didn't either
Yeah.
until I
Yeah.
started studying it. And so
Wow.
well, I didn't know OCD either. So so it's,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
they group a lot of stuff as anxiety disorders because, they're fear-based. And
Yeah.
yeah, OCD, because
Definitely.
OCD is obsessive compulsive. So you have some obsessive thoughts.
Mhm.
Maybe it's around germs, you're scared of germs, or maybe it's
Oh,
around
that's different.
illness. And then you have a compulsion, you have something that you do that that calms your anxiety. And so what you see is the person always washing their hands or scared to touch knobs. So you see the compulsion, but there's something that they're obsessing about, something, maybe germs. And panic attacks is another symptom of anxiety. And so panic disorder is just, you just have panic attacks, is your primary symptom.
Yeah.
You you get afraid out of the blue. And
Right.
yeah, and social anxiety is just people who have different fears of going out in public. Maybe they're afraid to eat in front of people. Maybe they're just afraid of being embarrassed, afraid to go to public restroom, afraid of public speaking, which is one of the most common fears. But I
Mhm.
mean, everybody has anxiety, but I guess there's just a point where if it interferes with normal daily life, then they call it a disorder once it starts interfering with normal daily life.
Kind of giving me understanding how all these are linked together. I know some people maybe watch them like me, checking out some check boxes like, oh, I'm scared of that, I'm scared of that.
Yeah, well,
The root of it all, fear. Like we said, the root of fear.
yeah, I think there's a few roots of it. Um, yeah, well, actually, we'll go about checking it off as I study this. It's like everything I study, you start to go through the symptoms, and I got
Yeah,
that. And then you go to the next one, it's like,
yeah,
oh, I got that too. Oh, I
yeah.
got that before you start to. But I did realize I do have anxiety and issues with anxiety is what I realized. But but you mentioned the roots of it. Yes. So one of the roots is fear. So obviously obviously you have fear, you're afraid. Another root of it is wanting to be in control. So it's wanting to be in control. So they did a study and they showed that stress that people felt was under control is less toxic than stress that people felt they couldn't manage.
Mm.
So then, so faith comes in there as well. So you
Mhm.
feel you have it under control. So if you want to control stuff, if there's a problem happen, say you got laid off, it's very stressful. But if this is your 20th time getting laid off and you're in the same or better situation you were before, it's not as stressful because you've done it before. So it's not just the stress, it's not just the event, it's your perception of the severity of it. They say 40% of the stuff that we worry about never happens. And then so control, but it can also be if you had a traumatic event,
Okay.
if you had some type of traumatic event. So if for instance someone there was this boy, he was going to get water and he was supposed to be asleep, but he
Mhm.
saw the TV was on, and so he stopped to watch the TV, and
Mhm.
and he's watching it for a while, and he's laughing at the show. And what he doesn't realize is his dad was behind him on his fifth beer, and he was blocking the TV. So his dad, if that boy doesn't get out of the way, I'm gonna. And then so then he comes up behind him and slaps him in the head. And it's like, oh, you're stupid, you're in the way. And now he has anxiety about people sneaking up behind him. Now he, has anxiety when if somebody calls him stupid. Now he goes off. If he thinks he's in the way. So now this traumatic event is maybe even unconsciously he associates. So you may be associated to some type of event. So you may have anxiety about going outside, or anxiety, fear of heights, or anxiety about a certain thing based on some traumatic event. Maybe you're scared of the dark because of something that happened to you in the dark. And so it can be tied to a traumatic event. And there was a study that they did where there were some people who didn't have long-term memory. They only had short-term memory. And so the doctor walked in and shook their hand, and then he had a pen in his hand that stuck them. And when he shook his hand, and they, ouch. Then he left the room, and he came back an hour later. So they didn't have long-term memory, so they couldn't remember what had happened. But when the doctor reached out to shake their hand, they wouldn't shake his hand. And then when they asked why they wouldn't shake his hand, they would say, "Oh, well, I don't trust doctors, or I don't trust people with white lab coats, or I don't trust people with brown shoes." So they didn't actually remember the event, but in our unconscious mind, we associate a feeling. We can associate a feeling to a certain situation or a certain. So maybe you don't trust people that look a certain way or that talk a certain way because of something that happened. And so it can be tied to something traumatic that happened, or event, something negative that happened. And it can be unconscious. So it can be unconscious as well. You don't necessarily know why you have this fear, or you don't necessarily know why you hate this thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely revelation for some people who may, not like something, or they're not sure, or like, why am I reacting to this in that way?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, a couple more causes is there was I'm talking about a lot of studies, but there was a study where they locked people in a room for 16 minutes. All they had to do was sit. There's a chair, but there's nothing. There's no TV, no cell phone, just an empty room. And there's a button sort of hidden, but you can find it. There's a button in the room. If you push that button, you would get a shock, and it would shock you. It was painful. It wasn't unbearably painful, but it was painful. So a very small percentage of people just sat for 16 minutes. Most people got up and they found the button. But what surprised them is that a lot of people kept pressing the button. So they kept pressing the button to get and administering pain on themselves just to avoid being bored. So a lot of us, we have anxiety because it's more painful to be bored. So people, they say, "Oh, I'm busy, I'm always doing this," but it's really because they don't want to be bored. They don't want to sit alone with their thoughts. A lot of people, they have anxiety because they're piling on more and more stuff just to avoid being bored.
Wow, that's interesting. That is so interesting.
Yeah. And then the last reason is anxiety. In the middle of it, anxiety. In the middle of it is I.
Yeah.
I. So it's
it's
pride. A lot of people have anxiety because of pride. So it's we're dependent on ourselves to do everything. We figure whatever happens is up to me. We're anxious because we're not trusting it to God. Whatever happens is me. If this is going to happen, it's me. I've heard someone said fear is looking into the future and assuming the absence of God.
Wow.
Faith is looking into the future and assuming the presence of God.
Wow.
So it's pride in the sense that we think that it's all dependent on us. We think that, I got here because of me, and wherever I'm going to go next is because of me. And so pride is also one of the causes of anxiety.
Wow, that's interesting, that not trusting God, and that kind of brings revelation to me regarding something the Holy Spirit spoke to me about not trusting God, and like understanding better what He was saying. Because wow, that is I was talking yesterday to Kim about trusting God, and wow, that's a hefty price we pay, right? To carry that ourselves. That's
Yeah,
heavy. That's
you're
heavy.
carrying the weight.
Yeah.
Carrying the weight.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of things we don't know is because we're carrying the weight. It's
Mhm.
I had a story I was talking about how during the pandemic, so a lot of people gained the COVID-19
Mhm.
because of the pandemic. So I have flat feet. I have
Mhm.
flat feet, and so when I walk, if I walk more than 30 minutes, hiking, it
Yeah.
hurts. My shins
Yeah.
hurt, or if I stand up at a festival or something, my back starts to hurt, and because I have flat feet, so a lot of things were painful. But during the pandemic, I was fasting at the beginning of it, and then all you could do was go exercise. So during the pandemic, I actually lost 25 pounds, 25 pounds. And then I found that, okay, now I could hike for an hour. Now I could hike for an hour and a half. Now I could hike for 2 hours and it doesn't hurt. Now I can stand for a while and it doesn't hurt. It's like I can do stuff. And so, yes, it was the flat feet that was causing the issue, but it
Yeah.
was also the weight. It was the extra weight I was carrying. So, yeah,
Yeah.
the flat feet was an issue, but it's impacted by the extra weight. And so that's how anxiety is. It's an extra weight that we're carrying. It's an extra weight that we're carrying that we don't need to carry. We're carrying it on ourselves. Yet, yes, the people at your work are a problem, but it's the weight. You got the extra weight. You thinking you have to do it. Yes, this financial
Right.
issue, but you have the extra weight of the anxiety of you worrying about it. So we're
Mhm.
carrying an extra weight of anxiety added to it. So we need to address the issues, but we don't need to bring the worry with it. We need to address the issue, but we don't need to necessarily bring the worry.
That's a whole word. The weight. The weight issue. Carrying the weight. Wow. Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. You talked about it some. So if there, I don't know if there's any more that you were wanting to share with us regarding how anxiety presents. I know you mentioned some
Mm,
like
yeah.
ulcers.
Yeah. Yeah. So anxiety. So I realized, yeah, I had anxiety, but a lot of times it's if you manage it well or you manage it in socially acceptable ways,
Mhm.
then you don't recognize it as a problem. You don't recognize it as a
Right.
problem.
Right.
So sometimes people will think, oh, you're detail oriented,
Hmm.
but it's really because you're overthinking.
Yeah.
Because anxiety, you're an overthinker. You're overthinking. You're thinking about everything.
Thinking.
Or some people may think, oh, you're very helpful, but it's really because you have a problem saying no. You have a problem saying no, and you're a people pleaser. Or people may think, oh, you're outgoing, but it's really because you're a people pleaser. Or people may say, oh, you're hardworking, but it's
Mhm.
really because you have a fear of failure. You have a fear of failure, which is a symptom of anxiety. Or, people may say, oh, you perform well under pressure. You really perform well under pressure. And it's
Mhm.
like, but that's because you got so much practice because you procrastinate all the time. You're procrastinating. So those are all symptoms of anxiety. Of anxiety. Your procrastination, fear of failure, overthinking, indecision. Indecision. You can't make a decision. You have the iconic, what do you want to eat? I don't care. What do you want to eat? What do you want to eat?
Yeah.
um, so those are things that I realize I have. Not wanting to go to bed. Could be anxiety. Not one. Continually hitting snooze can be because of anxiety. It's like, okay, once I go to bed, then I just have to start this cycle all over again. So you find reasons to stay up. Oh, well, let me look at this article. Oh, okay. Oh, oh, this
Oh,
mouse had a mustache. Let me read this really quick before I go to bed. Then next thing oh, Harpo Marx had a mustache. Oh, comedy. Let me watch this little clip. Then
man.
5 hours later, you're still awake. It's because you unconsciously you don't want to go to bed because when you wake up, it starts all over again. It starts all over again.
Oh man, I feel like you're reading my book.
And
It's
so
so funny.
yeah, so some other symptoms are you think sometimes and it presents itself differently to different people. So there isn't one list of things that because they're like we mentioned that they group a bunch of things under anxiety, but it looks differently in different people. So some people have problems sleeping. If it's severe, maybe they have night terrors, they have nightmares from it, or break into sweats. Some people may vomit. They get so nervous they're vomiting, or avoid eye contact because of anxiety. Is thinking that everybody's judging you, is a sign of anxiety, or just always thinking of the worst scenario, catastrophizing. So whatever happens, you're thinking about what's the worst scenario that could happen. It's yeah, so quite a few effects. It presents itself different in different people.
But Michael, you told us about anxiety. We talked about the root. You talked about some ways we might be able to recognize it in our own lives. So how do we overcome in your study? Anything the Holy Spirit has taught you, or through your study, and you're seeking knowledge about anxiety. How do we overcome? How do we talked about it some. We talked about trusting in God, but
Right. Let's see. So I can give a few different ways, a few biblical ways,
mhm.
and a few practical ways.
Okay.
And so one is in Matthew 6, the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 6, 24 to 34. Jesus talked about how no one can have two masters. Either he'll hate the one and love the other, or he'll serve the one despise. He said you can't serve both God and money. And then he goes on to talk about, therefore, he says, for that reason, don't worry about, and he don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. Don't worry about, and he talks about how, the birds of the air, they don't store food. They don't grow. They don't plant. They don't sow. Yet they reap, but yet they're not worried. And so he gives us a bunch of reasons not to worry. But he starts prefacing it. He says you can't serve God and mammon. Therefore, so all those things he talks about not worrying are a response to, or as a result of, you serving God and money. So the first root of it is that, the basic, so he's saying don't worry, but he's also saying that our worry is misplaced. We're worrying about material things. We're worried about things of the world. We're worried about, so he's saying if your focus is on these material things, your focus is on, your job promotion, your focus is on your clothes, your focus is on where am I going to live, your focus is on your status. If your focus is on those things, then you're going to have anxiety. So if your focus is on things, and he was saying basically it should be in the kingdom of God. So so the first one is your focus is wrong. If your focus is on those things, then you're going to have anxiety. So that's the first thing he's telling us there, is that, your anxiety is based on you're focused on the wrong thing. You're focused on the wrong thing. But he also says it's more than material things. But he talks about how the birds of the air, they don't worry, so we shouldn't have to worry. So he's using a lesser to greater argument, which a lot of the rabbis use. He's saying, these birds, they don't have to worry, and you're a child of God, and you're much greater than them. So he's saying if God is taking care of the lesser, then he's going to take care of the greater. And he's saying the grass, the lilies of the field, they're clothed greater than Solomon, but yet they're going to be thrown into the furnace, because once they dried up, they would use it to heat their furnace. So he's saying these things are only around for a short time. They're temporal. We're around eternal. And God take care of these, he's going to take care of you. So he's saying if he's taking care of these smaller things, he's going to take care of you. So that goes back to, the trust and the faith. So if he's taking care of these smaller things, then he's going to take care of you. And then he talks about how it's unproductive. He said, which one of you can add, depending on how, either a stack to your height or a year to your life by worrying. So it's unproductive. It's unproductive. So I heard this a long time ago. There was a rap song that said, you're in the rocking chair crew. You're never going nowhere, but you always got something to do. It's like you're in the rocking chair, you're not going anywhere, but you got something to do. And so it's unproductive. You're worrying, you're spending all your time worrying, but it's not getting you anywhere. And then he says that you're acting like you don't know God. He said, these are the things that Gentiles worry about. And so those are the reasons. Lastly he talks about that it's unbearable. So he says, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow can take care of itself. So basically, God has given us enough grace for today. So he's given us enough grace to worry about today. And we don't have enough grace to worry about, the future 5 years. So it's unbearable. So those are the reasons that from the Sermon on the Mount that we get. And so those, we'll only accept those obviously if we have faith in Jesus' words. And so those are the first set of solutions is believing Matthew 6:24-34. Believe in Matthew 6:24-34 and faith. And so if you don't have that faith, to pray for that faith. And of course, prayer in general is a method. Prayer. They Carolyn Leaf, doctor, talks about how scientific study shows that 12 minutes of focused prayer over 8-week period changes a brain in a way that can be measured in a brain scan. So scientists have actually proved that prayer is effective, that prayer works. So prayer is the next thing to do. Take every thought captive. The verse talks about take every thought captive, and that's kind of one of those Christianese things. Renew your mind, take every. It's like, yeah, well, how do I do that?
Right.
So a practical method to take every thought captive is to actually try to be aware when you have the negative thoughts or the negative self-talk. So this is kind of even broader than just anxiety, but your negative self-talk in general, become aware of it. And so when you get that talk, that thing that says, oh, I'm so stupid, or, oh, but specifically for worry, when you get that thought, to actually analyze it, maybe even write it down and analyze it and say, okay, well, why? When you're worried about it, why is this reasonable to actually worry about this, or what? Analyze it, maybe write it down, and just try to actually judge that thought. Is this thought, especially if it's a negative thought, like, why am I so stupid, or judge this, why am I thinking that? So just be aware of it. Be not judge it. So don't judge it, but just be aware of it. And just once you start becoming aware of those thoughts, whenever you think, oh, I'm gonna fail at this, or oh, just become aware of it and write it down, and so you're taking it captive, and you're able to look at it later, and so for a practical approach, some people suggest when you have a worrying thought, if you think about, oh man, I'm getting, oh man, I'll never get married, oh man, like you have the thought, write it down. So write it down, and you can set a worry appointment. Okay, from 7:30 to 8 o'clock is my worry time. So I'm going to write this down, and I'll come back to it at the worry time. I'm not going to think about it now. I'll just come back during the worry time. And so during that worry appointment, look at all of them and think, okay, is it as bad as it was when I first thought of it? Is it as big of an issue? Is it how big of an issue will this be 20 years from now? How big of an issue? So and then think about it, and then go ahead and worry about them, and then put it away, because if you, obviously you also want to think, is there something I can do about it now? So if there is a worry and there's something you can do about it now, then do it.
Right.
So it's not just, it's not, Jesus isn't just saying that, okay, you got this issue, just, don't, oh, you don't have a job, yeah, just go ahead and pray all day, and don't worry about it. So it's like, so do what you can do whatever you can do now. But once you've done all you can do, then trust it to God. Do whatever you can do now. So do everything in your power that you can do it. But then after that, you don't need to worry anymore. Give the worry back. The next thing is they did a study with women. The study was women, and they to measure stress and anxiety, and they saw that poor women have a higher level of stress than women that aren't poor. So being poor is a known stressor, and that's was talked about during the pandemic and the COVID and everything. So but poor women have a higher level of stress. So being poor is a higher level of stress. But what they found, though, is that it didn't manifest itself in a negative way for those who had healthy coping mechanisms.
Mm.
And it was the same with the study on PTSD. Those who had healthy coping, so coping mechanism is how you manage your stress, how you manage your stress. So different people manage stress in different ways. Some people, they make joke, they make light of it. Some people complain. Some people, talk to their friends about it. Some people pray about it. Some people go and drink half a bottle of tequila for it. Some people, different people have different ways of coping with stress. Some people go exercise. So the how you cope with it is as important as or more important than the actual stressor. So your response to the issue is more important to your health than the issue itself. So your response to the issue, your coping mechanisms, having healthy coping mechanisms. For social anxiety, people who are scared to go out and scared to interact, scared to go to networking events or scared to be in public. So one thing to do would be to be curious. Be curious about other people. So a lot of the times anxiety is because we're focused on ourselves. So if you're curious about, hey, I want to go find out, oh, what do you do, or what? Tell me your story. How did you, tell me your testimony, or tell me what do you do for work, or what do you do? And if you're genuinely interested, and you're not like trying to think, oh, I wonder what they think about me. Oh, what am I going to say next? Oh, what am I like? If you really are can actually
Yeah,
get
yeah,
yourself to be interested in other people,
yeah.
then the focus actually comes off of you and it goes off them, because we can't really multitask. And so if we're actually genuinely interested in the other person, then the focus comes off of us and we're not anxious. And it actually makes you interesting. It makes you interesting. Like the fact that you're really interested in somebody makes you
Yeah,
interesting to them. It makes you interesting to them because you'll just be really intrigued with someone is saying and listen to them for a half hour, and they'll leave thinking, oh, that was a great person. And you're like, oh, I'm really interested in what they're saying, and that's great. And they're like, oh, that person was great. It was a really good, nice person. All they know is the feeling that you left them with, because you made them feel better. It's like they don't know anything about you, but they feel like, oh, that was a really good person. So be curious.
right.
Be curious about other people. For indecision, if people who have trouble making decisions, so which
Yeah, I need this.
I have a trouble with,
Yeah,
one solution to that is to make decisions quickly. So,
okay,
obviously not big decisions. When I was
right.
teaching this, somebody said, yeah, like my first marriage. It's like, no, 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 not like that.
I'm not good at it.
But for smaller decisions,
Sorry.
smaller decisions. So you can practice this, like if you go to a restaurant. If you go
Yeah.
to a restaurant, like I want to look at every menu page, so
Mhm.
it's horrible going to Cheesecake Factory with a 20-page menu
Yeah.
and all the options. I want
Mhm.
to think about, well, what did I have yesterday? So what you can do is just spend a little time looking at it and make a decision.
Mhm.
Make a decision quickly. So make a decision quickly, whether the waiter is there or not, and okay, I'm going to go with this. You may decide later, oh, I should have had the fish instead of the chicken, but you'll realize, you know what? I didn't die of hunger because I didn't get this. And it gives you practice. It'll strengthen the muscle of decision making. So if you just make decisions quickly, you learn to trust your own decisions. You trust your own decision making process, and you'll get better at making decisions by just taking the practice of making decisions.
Wow, those are good. That's good and practical. I
Yeah.
love, and there's so many. I love that you shared several different strategies and little pieces of the puzzle that we need for overcoming this.
So another one is to help other people. So again, with getting the focus off yourself, if you're helping other people, if you have a mission, if you have a goal that's bigger than yourself,
Yeah.
then that keeps you from focusing on your issues. If you're
Mhm.
helping other people with their issues, then it keeps you from always focusing on your issues, always focusing on your issues. If you have anxiety, listening to slow music, maybe worship music, can cure anxiety, or even they call it attention redirection. So if you hold ice, that actually makes you less anxious because it takes your attention to your hand.
Yeah.
Cold.
Yeah.
And whatever you're focused on, your mind thinks it's important. So you're going to be focused on that. And that's actually kind of just broader in life too. Whatever you focus on, your mind is going to think it's important, and it's going to give more attention to it. And it's going to, if you think of like if when you're trying to remember the name of a movie and you can't think of it, and then 2 days later it'll just pop into your head. It's because your unconscious was churning for it. So whatever you focus on, which is sort of outside of anxiety, but whatever you focus on, we actually have a part of our brain, reticular activating system, that will filter out things that, like, if you have a belief, if you have a goal that you're focused on, it'll let through things that support that belief, obstacles to your path, things that support your goals, and it'll filter out everything else because we can't process all the information we get. So what your reality is filtered by what you're focused on and what your beliefs are. So if you're always focusing on negative, you're going to see more negative.
That's good. And like I said, that's just bringing more clarity to some things that I did hear Holy Spirit tell me about, which was focus. So now I'm kind of understanding better, what was said and why. What I want to do is, you guys, you see now, I'm talking about Michael just has so much information. He's been studying this, and every topic that he has studied, like I said, he has that available on social media for you to review. If something that he mentioned earlier piqued your interest, as well as, Michael, do you have more information on anxiety on your YouTube?
I do. So I currently have 3 lessons on anxiety. So if you go to Unchained Disciples, there's a list of series, or you can click through from there. There's something that says watch the video, which will take you to YouTube. So there's a playlist for seeking wholeness. So there's 3 lessons on anxiety that we've done so far, and there'll be one more coming in a couple of weeks. There's a whole series on seeking wholeness with other topics about wholeness. Let me see. Topics like wounds from the past, mindsets that'll change your life, dealing with hurt, fear and shame, the story you tell yourself, talking about, the inner stories you tell yourself, the Christian mindsets, 12 habits to renew your mind, coping mechanisms, emotional triggers. So so various topics on emotional health.
It's a lot, and it's good. It's needed. Oh man, that's like you said. Yeah, that's definitely. It's been a while studying that, and need to, like, not actually, like, take it in, like, yeah. So, but okay. So Michael said his website is www.unchaineddisciples.com. You can find him on Instagram at Michael_Leadon. Like I said, YouTube, Unchained Disciples as well. But if you go to his website, I think, like you said, you have a link to a blog and YouTube there.
Well, the website is a blog.
So the website is a blog. Okay.
In each of the studies, there's a link that says watch the video, and that'll take you to the YouTube videos, over 100. So the classes for the past 7 years are there. And on YouTube. So you can watch the YouTube videos. Michael Leadon on Instagram and TikTok.